There's a particular entry in a long-running survival horror series. You know the one. The game that strapped 4 campaigns together, dropped the survival and dialed the action up to 11. The one with exploding helicopters, cities crumbling, motorcycle stunts straight out of Fast and Furious, and one of the most over-the-top final bosses to ever growl at a protagonist. Yeah, that one, the one where Geoffrey the Giraffe gets a happy ending. Welcome to the Snake Pit, where we're full of bile and venom. I'm your host, Snake Damon, and today I'm dissecting the collapse of creativity itself. You see, the left's obsession with safe narratives, crowd-tested content, and hollow virtue signaling has rotted pop culture from the inside out. Risk-taking is punished unless it panders. Bold ideas get buried under algorithms, and anything that dares to be loud, ridiculous, or even slightly off-message gets swarmed by critics pretending to care about legacy, even when the legacy they're defending was always built on camp, chaos, and B-movie brilliance. Which brings us to today's target, as I recently replayed this train wreck. The one where Geoffrey the Giraffe gets a happy ending. Yeah, that game. The punching bag of the franchise, the one where survival horror took a backseat to bombastic action, and fans lost their minds because their beloved zombie series dared to sprint instead of shamble. So here's the thing. People love to say RE4 was the peak of the series, and sure, it did reinvent the franchise, but everything that came after gets compared to it with zero nuance. Especially RE6. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. Hell, I'm not even saying it's good by traditional standards. But I am saying it deserves better than the hate parade it's been marched through since day one. First, let's strip away the name. If Resident Evil 6 had been released under a different title, if it was just some new IP about a bioterror outbreak with 4 intersecting storylines, it wouldn't get half the flack. The hate only burns as hot as it does because it dared to wear the Resident Evil name while doing something wildly different. But here's the twist. Resident Evil has always changed. From fixed cameras and tank controls to over-the-shoulder shooting to first-person nightmares and VR. The series reinvents itself constantly. So why does Resident Evil 6 get dragged for doing what every entry has done? Evolve. And let's talk about tone. This franchise was never The Exorcist. It was Return of the Living Dead meets Days of Our Lives. It's always been campy, always been corny. Resident Evil 1 literally opened with a live-action sequence that looked like it was shot in someone's backyard on expired film stock. So when Resident Evil 6 embraced the absurdity, the exploding aircraft, mutant presidents, boulder-punching muscleheads, and motorcycle chases on rooftops, it wasn't a betrayal. It was tradition with a bigger budget. Gameplay-wise, yeah, it's action-heavy for some characters, but let's use logic for a second. These aren't terrified civilians anymore. They're battle-scarred survivors, trained agents, biohazard-hardened pros who faced everything from Cerberus dogs to chainsaw-wielding maniacs. At this point, it's Monday again. It'd be more ridiculous not to see them fighting back with military precision and brutal efficiency. When Chris Redfield goes into full Rambo mode, it makes sense. When Leon's campaign starts with creeping dread and escalates into chaos, that's balance. The different styles weren't confusion, they were reflection. Each campaign mirrored the characters' pasts and personalities. Sure, it wasn't seamless, but it was deliberate. And let's not ignore ambition. RE6 was trying to be an event. 4 full-length campaigns, interwoven stories, different tones, gameplay styles, and even returning fan favorites. It bit off more than it could chew, no question, but at least it bit. Compare that to what passes for AAA horror these days. Soulless corridor crawlers in first person with barely functioning inventory systems, and honestly more walking than actual gameplay. Say what you want about RE6, but it was never boring. It didn't hide behind atmosphere and padding. It gave you content. Too much, maybe, but I mean, better too much than the half-measured garbage we get now. And let's not forget what came after. People love to say RE6 was the lowest point out, but Umbrella Corps exists. That wasn't just a step down, it was a full-on cave dive. A limp, lifeless shooter that ditched characters, lore, tone, everything, in favor of a failed attempt to cash in on competitive multiplayer trends. No soul, no story, no reason to exist. That was the betrayal. RE6 at least had the guts to care about being Resident Evil, even if it was Resident Evil on steroids with a Red Bull chaser. And let's be real for a moment. With Capcom in full-blown remake mode, you know what's coming. Resident Evil 5 is basically queued up like a shotgun shell in a tight corridor, and Resident Evil 6 isn't far behind. But here's the million-dollar question. What do you want a remake of Resident Evil 6 to be? Do you strip it back to a slow-burn, single-character survival horror with no co-op and half the campaign content? Do you delete Jake entirely because the internet decided he's cringe? Because let's face it, if they remake this game in the style of the others, you're going to lose everything that made it stand out. Say what you want about the original, but it knew what it was and gave you a whole buffet of experiences, and maybe that's the point. Resident Evil 6, like Resident Evil 5, had one undeniable strength: couch co-op chaos. It may not have been high art, but it was fun. Ridiculous, over-the-top, monster-stomping fun. You could scream, laugh, and curse your way through the absurdity with a friend. And that's worth more than another moody flashlight simulator where nothing happens for 30 minutes. Strip it of co-op and you're not fixing the game. You're gutting it. You want to remake it? Fine, but remember that this one, for all its flaws, had heart and shared hilarity. Something modern horror has almost completely forgotten. So yeah, Resident Evil 6 is messy, it's loud, it's dumb, but it's also earnest. It tried to be a finale, a greatest hits medley, an evolution of every idea that came before, and if you look past the rage, past the blind loyalty to earlier entries, you'll find a game that swung for the fences. And while it didn't hit a home run, it sure as hell didn't bunt either. Thanks for dropping by the Snake Pit, where we thrive on untapped potential and lost opportunities. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell like the video, and leave your opinions in the comments, where naturally I won't read them. Until next time, stay venomous.